line of business in marketing technology, pharmaceutical, and healthcare industries. She is a Google Analytics certified professional and has a master's in science from where'd you go to school?
My master's is from Worcester Polytechnical Institute, or WPI for short.
Great. And that's a degree in marketing and technology innovation.
Yep.
Katie Robbert, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited.
It's great to have you here. Now, you wrote this white paper where you developed a process for leveraging subject matter expertise audited social media data to understand relevant subtopics. And I know that's a mouthful. So walk us through this sort of innovative approach to discovering keywords.
So the problem that we were seeing was that a lot of people are just doing what we're putting in the bucket of basic SEO research. And so they're using their keyword planners, they're using tools like RFs and SEMrush, which are really, really, really good, robust tools. But the limitation is what the user is sort of thinking about and imagining of what my keywords might be. And so we decided to take a different tact and actually start with social media data where people are having conversations about certain topics, because when you're commenting on social media, you tend to use longer phrases and sentences. And what we wanted to do was learn a little bit more around the language that people were actually using versus, these are the 5 terms that I want my company to rank for. That might not be the way that people are actually talking. So what we did was we partnered with TalkWalker. They're a co-author on the paper, and we actually used their social media export. So we exported data from different social media channels to get those conversational qualitative data sets. And then, what we did from there was we were basically just trying to figure out what are people saying what. So we used what is considered machine learning topic modeling to figure out what are the commonalities, what are the common terms, common phrases, things that stick out. And then we were able to move forward with our keyword research from there. So we got very different results from just doing straight keyword research.
So break it down for us, because I know TalkWalker has a free and a premium version. Could you just do a quick search and pull a cloud that way that shows basically density? I mean, could anyone do this, or do you have to be a TalkWalker customer?
You can definitely use the free version. You can get, those high level terms. And so if you put in topics like, I think the example we use in the paper is, coffee shop, for example, you want to know what people are saying. And a lot of it comes down to, are you really focusing in on those intentional keywords, such as coffee shop near me, or coffee shop that delivers, or coffee shop open now. So you're not just ranking for coffee shop, but you're also thinking about the user intent, why they're searching for you in the first place.
So words like latte and cappuccino and tea, and words that don't contain the C word, but the seed word, but are semantically related.
Yeah, you want to make sure that you're catching a lot of those as well. So if you put in a broad topic such as coffee, you would expect to see things such as latte, espresso, types of milk, non-dairy milk, or sweeteners, those types of things. But what it also comes down to is sort of using your own personal judgment of, okay, I'm a coffee shop and I only serve, black coffee. So I don't need to worry about things like latte and espresso. But if I, specialize in those other things, then those are words that I should probably include in my research. And if I'm not, then I'm creating my own gap and letting competitors take that keyword search away from me.
So walk us through this process, because what you're saying is you get the keywords from TalkWalker. Then what do you do with them?
So what we do with them is topic modeling. And so topic modeling is a machine learning process that essentially starts to break down all of the different conversational data that you've pulled out, all of that qualitative data, and say there were, as an example, 20 instances of the word espresso. There were 30 instances of the word latte with extra foam. There were 40 instances of the word delivery near me. those types of things. And so what it's doing is we're extracting the data from Talkwalker, from, Facebook, for example, and we want to find people who are talking about coffee, dark roast, light roast, whatever it is they're talking about, and start to process it. So, that second step, once we've extracted the data, is topic modeling. There's a lot of different, I think, free codes. I forget the exact word. Open source is the word that I was looking for. Open source code for doing topic modeling. You do have to have some language, coding language expertise to be able to do it. It's not something that you can just pull off the shelf. For example, there's not a good topic modeling tool. So we at Trust Insights have built our own version, our own proprietary version of topic modeling, using a lot of that open source code to then process the data to figure out what are the commonalities, what are the terms that are kind of close to each other. So you might have certain types of sweeteners near non-dairy milk substitutes. And so trying to pair those things together, or there may be words in there that you weren't even aware of, for example. So that's sort of the next step. And then after we figured out what are the common terms that people are using when they're talking about the topic of coffee, then we can go ahead and do our keyword research.
But in the paper, you said that you pull that data from Talkwalker and then you basically rebuild the list manually in like SEMrush. And that becomes, based on the volumes there, because you said, that social media is a great place to search for relevance, but not so much volume. So my understanding reading the white paper was that you basically pull that topic cloud, and which I know you can export as a CSV, as an Excel sheet from Talkwalker, and then of course pull that into something like SEMrush and get a sense on volume and how to prioritize there. Did I misunderstand it? I mean, because I don't have the topic modeling capabilities. So could I do that? Would that still be a valuable process?
Absolutely. And so if you don't have the topic modeling capabilities, you can do that more slimmed back version that you just described, Eric. So you can pull those conversations or that word cloud as you're describing from Talkwalker, and then use that as your basis for the keyword research, and use a tool such as RFs or SEMrush to try to find similar type terms. Like, so you have your seed term as you described, and then pulling out those other relevant terms to find the density, the difficulty, those types of things that you would typically see in an SEO project.
So in the white paper, you show a data visualization that you made by doing the same thing from Reddit. And Reddit's an awesome place to go for keywords and for topic modeling, because all you have to do is go into a subreddit where they're talking about the topic and sort by, most popular or rising, and you can see what people are interested in. And so really, whenever I do a podcast, I always pop in there first just to get a sense of what people are interested in the topic that I'm talking about with a subject matter expert. But you showed a way of actually exporting hard data from Reddit so that you could actually make like, a word cloud. In your case, it was a little different, but how do you do that?
So it's very much the same that we just talked about sort of with the first question. And so it's extracting all of that conversational data. The reason why we like to process our own data is because we like to take really big volumes of data. And so, we think that the word clouds within Talkwalker are really good, but we also like to run it through our own proprietary topic modeling software, which is essentially the same kind of thing to say, this is the most popular term, or these are the most popular terms. So we also like to get those longer phrases to see if people are saying the exact same, sentence over and over again, in addition to those shorter 1 or 2 word keywords. So it's very much the same process of going into Reddit, subreddits, those forums, extracting the data through Talkwalker, running it through topic modeling, and then figuring out, what are the keywords. But Eric, to your point, if you don't have access to that topic modeling software, then you can look at the data, the word clouds within Talkwalker, and start to do it a little bit more manually that way.
But
Absolutely.
for Reddit, is there a way to export keywords and hard data out of Reddit?
I believe, and I need to just double check for a quick second. I believe everything that we pulled came directly out of TalkWalker. Um, but also Reddit has an API, so you can export from TalkWalker, but if you are also able to build an API directly into Reddit. So basically an API, for those who don't know, is essentially like a tunnel. So the tunnel connects from Reddit to your, RStudio software. And it just, you say, these are the things that I want to extract. And so you can build the API to connect the two systems and say, I want to extract these things. So you can do it both ways. If you don't have an API, you can pull directly from TalkWalker.
Got it. And another thing you mentioned in the report is you said, when you pull a list of keywords, you basically, before you go after them, you discount the difficult words. Because some words are going to be so competitive, it's like, why even go for them from off the starting block, unless you already have high authority. So when you're discounting for difficult keywords, where do you draw the line? How do you know what is too difficult and what, is a realistic target?
It really depends. And so it depends on how much competition there is for that particular keyword. Like if it's a keyword like Google Analytics, for example, that's a very competitive keyword. Google itself wants to be ranking for its own keywords. And so those are going to be tough to rank for. And so drawing the line is really sort of a judgment call in terms of how hard you want to fight for that particular keyword. And in order to fight for it, you need to be creating a lot of content around that keyword, a lot of authoritative content. We can get into, what, that authority means. Drawing the line really comes down to, what kind of resources you have available to fight for keywords. And so what we try to do is we try to find keywords that are still somewhat competitive, maybe a little bit on the easy side, but are relevant to the business. And so for a lot of our clients, we look at the organic keywords versus the branded keywords. Because you should be ranking for the branded keywords for your own business, but the organic keywords might be things you might not be thinking about. And again, that comes down to sort of like the near me or, that search intent. The difficulty goes like in RFs, for example, on a scale of 1 to 100. So we start looking around, 50 and below, and then we see if there's any other more difficult keywords that we want to cherry pick from there.
50 and below, what is 50?
It's their ranking scale in terms of difficulty of how competitive it is, how many people are trying to rank for it,
who's ranking?
Companies, people that are writing content around featuring these particular keywords on their websites or in their news articles.
Because I know that like in SEMrush and Ahrefs, they have these sort of arbitrary difficulty numbers. Mm-hmm. But are you saying that there's some sort of consistent number that you can use across platforms?
Not necessarily. The difficulty scale, what goes into it might be different in Ahrefs versus SEMrush. So really you just have to look at what their scale is overall. So if it's a 0 to 100 in Ahrefs, then you can sort of say like, all right, I want to look at 50 and below. In SEMrush, you can do the same thing, look at their scale, what the range is, and figure out what's that midpoint. That's usually where we start. But again, it really depends on what the goal is of the project. If someone wants to really, really be ranking for that really difficult keyword, okay, yep, we have to then figure out what is the plan to, get that search traffic.
Katie, what is Google Passages?
So Google Passages is, it's like a text snippet. So a really good example is if you Google for marketing over coffee co-hosts, then you're going to get a little passage from the Marketing Over Coffee website, which is going to explain who the co-hosts are. So in some ways, Google Passages could take away search traffic from your website. If someone is Googling something and they get the answer right away, they no longer need to go to your website to find the answer to their question. So basically, it's something that Google recognizes as that contextually relevant answer to the question being asked from your website.
And so, talk to us a little bit about zero-click keyword searches and how SEOs and digital marketers are now essentially competing against Google.
So zero-click is essentially you want to show up as the first thing when someone searches for, again, using the example, Google Analytics. You would assume that Google comes up. So if you just search for Google Analytics, then whatever the first thing is that comes up that somebody is like, okay, that's the thing that I want, that's going to be your zero-click. And that's when, nobody's leaving Google. So if Google is ranking for its own terms, then they're stealing all of the traffic that we are trying to build by trying to rank for Google terms, for example. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. In the last week's episode, we spoke to Brian Dean, the SEO at Backlinko, and his site is ranking number 1 for YouTube channel art, YouTube channel name, YouTube tags, YouTube SEO, YouTube Studio, YouTube names, which is very impressive in such a crowded space. So it was a very rare, exclusive one-on-one with Brian Dean. And if you want to hear that, subscribe to the podcast. You can get it. It's last week's show. News and social media monitoring is a crowded space with a lot of competitors. And if you're in the market for media monitoring, I tested the top platforms in the industry and wrote a report about it that you can download for free. It's got feature by feature comparisons, as well as a user rating chart and reviews. It's software agnostic. I was not paid by anyone to write it. It's fluff free. And it is a deep dive into the state of social media monitoring technology. We cover AI. It's a terrific report. So if you're a buyer of social media monitoring solutions, this guide, which took me months to write, and I personally tested all the platforms myself, is something you may be interested in downloading. And you can get that at ericschwartzman.com/monitoring. Let's talk for a minute, Katie, about Google's page quality guidelines for reviewers. Tell us what this project is all about.
So the page quality guidelines for reviewers is it's actually a manual. Human raters rate a small section of pages based on 175-page manual given to Google's AI for training data. And so an example of this, something that I actually worked on similarly when I worked in the pharmaceutical industry, is we were trying to do something called internet monitoring. And so basically we were trying to figure out sentiment, positive, negative. So we as humans had to actually rate based on our opinion, is this positive, is this negative, and then feed it into the system as the test data. So in any algorithm, in any AI, you always have humans up front creating that test data. And so that's what this project is. It's humans who are rating the quality based on the guidelines that Google have given to say, okay, this is our criteria of what a quality page would be. So go ahead and read all of these pages and rate them, and that becomes the test data set for the algorithm to then go ahead and say, you've told me that these 5 things are quality. Let me go find the similar things and then say that those are also quality.
And it's not just a static thing, right? I mean, isn't AI somehow involved in neural networks? Can you explain that?
So in Google algorithms, AI is very much involved. So AI is essentially a series of math equations, if you really break it down to its most basic level. And what it's doing is it's taking data and running it over and over again to see, okay, I can apply this here, I can apply this here, I can apply this here, because that's what the humans have programmed it to be. So in this particular instance, humans are training the algorithm to say, this is what I want you to look for. These are the scores I want you to give to the pages that meet this criteria based on what I've told you to do. So The way that Google functions, the way that they're able to scale is all artificial intelligence based.
So it's not like these people are going to rate my website.
They might probably like they're going after bigger websites right now, but at some point they might, or they're going to say, we've trained the algorithm on these larger sites. So eventually when it gets to the Eric Schwartzman site, then we already know what to rank it for or what to rate it for.
Right. But the idea, right, as I understand it, is they're basically having humans rate a sample,
Yep.
and that will be applied to a neural network that will then use those same learnings in the search algorithm over the whole internet. So it's not so much that they're going to come rank my site. Instead, they're going to determine what is page quality based on these human reviewers. And then if I don't meet those standards, I won't be seen as high quality.
Correct.
So let's break this down for a bit, because in your report, I know you actually mentioned a few of the passages from the expert, authority, and trust, this sort of EAT acronym, which has been talked about quite a bit in SEO circles about how to create content that is seen as high quality. And it says, and I'll read it here, for news, Google says high quality pages should include, quote, descriptions of primary sources and other original reporting referenced, unquote. How do you interpret that?
So basically, the way that I interpret that is that, so Fox News, for example, technically it has a high quality score. Whether or not the news is always accurate is, completely subjective and, depends on who you're asking. And so Google does some amount of fact checking. But basically they're looking for, things that are not plagiarized. They're looking for, when they say that original reporting referenced. So if you're just copying and pasting someone else's news story, then obviously that's going to get a lower score. They use, I forget exactly what it's called. It's the GDELT. It's the Google, sorry, I have my notes. The Google's news database, the GDELT project, is a good example of what's in there. And so the news sources have to register to be vetted by Google, and high quality score pages should be linking to credible news sources. And so Google has its own database of those sites and sources that have been vetted. So you have to, in some way, sort of apply to become part of the high quality news source.
So in terms of a primary source, I guess if you're reporting about news that's happening, everyone is going to be reporting about major news that's happening. So how would Google determine a primary news source? How do you think? I mean, obviously we don't know, we're just guessing, but any thoughts on that?
My gut is saying that it might be, who's first out of the gate. So one of the things with the internet is things move so incredibly quickly that an internet minute is really like a nanosecond. So it's a blink of an eye. And so if you are not immediately first out of gate with the news story, then chances are, you're already forgotten. You're in the past. And the attention span of consumers of the information is so fast. So that's just sort of my like off the cuff, like thinking of how it works. Really, I would say that it's, really only Google knows. And those are some of the, not to be like completely vague, but like those are the mysteries that only Google will ever know. But it's, it's like it's the early news, people who can like immediately start reporting a story from those trusted sites that have gone through the Google News database that have been vetted by Google.
Sure. Get it out first. That makes sense. They also say that the news should be accurate, but as we know, truth is not a ranking factor.
Right.
So how do they create or how should we, as communicators and maybe even as public relations people, if we're doing company news or corporate bloggers or content marketers, how do we create newsworthy content that Google deems as accurate if truth is not a ranking factor? What's your take on that?
So like you said, Google's not looking at the accuracy of the news story in terms of a ranking. So it has to be, a high authority page that Google deems, as authoritative, like we had just talked about. And so they do some level of fact checking, but really, they can't stay on top of all of it, even with their AI and algorithms. So work with a good PR firm is really sort of the short answer. Make sure that you are doing your best to represent the news and work with those trusted resources to get your news out there, with your byline or your company's byline, but work with them, partner with them instead of sort of like fighting against them to say, I want to, get in there, I want to compete against a Forbes or a Wall Street Journal. Work with them is probably the best way to get the more accurate news covered.
Katie Robbert, CEO of Trust Insights. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Okay, so that's episode 1. Now we're going to do episode 2, all right?
Okay.
Our guest today is Katie Robbert. She is CEO of Trust Insights. They are an authority on data analytics and data accuracy and data management. She has extensive experience in SEO and data analytics. And prior to that, she built and grew multi-million-dollar lines of business in the marketing, technology, pharmaceutical, and healthcare industries. She is Google Analytics certified and has a Master of Science in Marketing and Technological Innovation. Katie, welcome back.
Thank you. Thank you for having me back.
Yeah. So, we were having that great conversation in the last episode about this sort of Google's page quality guidelines for reviewers. And I'd like to, drill down a little deeper on that if we can. And I was hoping we could start with something that you pulled out and blurbed in your report that you wrote on powering modern SEO with social media data. And there's a link to that report in the show notes for the podcast if you want to download it. But in there, it says for artistic content, Google says high quality content is unique. And you also mention in your process of sort of reverse engineering keywords based on social data that you can use TalkWalker's visual insights to get a sense of the most relevant and engaging content in your sector and sort of use it as a proxy for emulating authoritative consensus. Explain that to us.
Well, that was definitely a mouthful. And so essentially what it boils down to is, so if you look at Google Voice and Google Photos, for example, those are free things that, consumers can use. Google is using the information that people upload into that to then train their AI on visuals that they can understand. And so, the example that we always give is, pictures of animals, cats and dogs. And so, if you look in Google Photos, it asks you like, what is this a picture of? Can you, categorize this thing for me? And so basically Google is having you do some of the work for them in terms of creating that test, that training data set for their algorithm. So that when they are looking at, devaluing stock imagery, for example, there's so much common stock imagery that they're going to say, like, we only want, 2 of the 5 that are a little bit more unique. But it's also, is it easy to understand? Can they use their test data set based on what we, the consumers, have given them to say, I understand what this is a picture of? And so it's going to discount anything that it can't understand. After all of the millions and billions of images and I guess the Google Voice piece of it as well, like everything that it's understanding and absorbing is then applying to its AI to say, we know what this is, basically. So we're actually doing the hard work for Google is the bottom line.
So, I spoke to Doug Kessler, who runs an agency called Velocity Partners, and they do B2B content marketing. And they have like major clients, they do big projects. And he was saying, we're in this sort of content, this B2B content deluge with so much crap out there. It's like I get daily these emails from people who want to write for my blog. And like, when I was just getting started, I was like, yeah, send me something. And I would just get these, 800 word posts of just nothingness, like just all stop words. I mean, it was just like, there was no there at all. They weren't even readable. And it's like, there's so much of that out there. And one of the things you see in a lot of those blog posts are these, unsplash photos or, Adobe photos, this sort of stock photography. And I wonder if Google says that high value content is unique,
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if using stock photo devalues your content in the eyes of Google.
It seems to. So you're always best off using your own photos because they are unique. You own them, and you're not going to see 800 other websites with the exact same cover photo. So my personal website, katierobbert.com, is one that we stood up as a test to demonstrate how to set up, your personal brand website. So if you go there, you're definitely going to be disappointed in terms of the content that's on it because I don't maintain it. And one of the things that we were sort of chuckling about when we were setting it up was that the stock photo that I picked is, it came out of WordPress, which was the how we were powering the website, but it's a stock photo. And I've seen that same stock photo on probably at least 50 other websites in the same space because it's a picture of, coffee and a plant and, a desk. And you're probably picturing it now. It's
Right.
like a little succulent plant.
Yeah.
And it's very pretty, but it's not unique. I would be better off taking a picture from my own office of my own plants that may not be as polished, but it's unique, it's authentic, and it's something that Google can say, nobody else has this picture.
Yeah, images are tough. Like it's not enough to, pull the keywords from Talkwalker,
Mm-hmm.
put them into SEMrush for volume,
Mm-hmm.
write interesting content that's genuinely compelling and not me too,
Yep.
and get original artwork. I mean, it's like you're in the media business, right?
Yeah, it's real. I mean, there's a reason why there are these subspecialties in terms of content writers. So, anybody, to your point, Eric, anybody can write a blog post. That doesn't mean that it's any good. It could be 800 words of fluff, but people really specialize in doing that hardcore research to make sure that it's original thoughts, original opinions, very specific keywords. Your best bet is to use some sort of a framework or an outline. And I believe the paid version of SEMrush actually gives you some of those starter outlines for content writers, or you can outsource them to their writers as well. Because they've really focused in on, they're like, yep, writing good content is not easy. So let us help you get half the way there by giving you those, starter questions, the questions that you should be answering for people in order to have really good content.
Yeah.
We talk a lot when we're talking with our clients and when we're explaining really good content strategy, we talk about the Hero Hub help framework. And so the majority of your content should be the help. How do I? What do I? What is? And so you're answering those questions versus just trying to rank for one specific keyword. You're really thinking about the user intent when they're looking for, how do I set up Google Analytics is probably easier to rank for than just straight Google Analytics as a term.
Google says, and this is from your white paper again, the Powering Modern SEO with Social Media Data white paper, and there's a link in the show notes for it if you want to download that. But you pull out from this Google Page Reviewers Guidelines document this quote, which says Google says informational content has a quote very high quality main content. It says, start it over again. Google says informational content has very high quality main content, and main content is capitalized. What is main content?
It's the main part of the page. It's not the navigation or anything else. So if you look at a Trust Insights page, for example, we have that whole sidebar with you might also like or some other resources. So the main content is the content itself. It's the content that you've written specifically about that topic.
Got it. So it's not like it's your pages versus your posts.
Right.
And with respect to, it also says, high quality main content is original, accurate, comprehensive, clearly communicated, professionally presented, and should reflect expert consensus as appropriate. So let's break that down a little for a minute here. The original is easy enough. The comprehensive is easy enough, but accurate, that seems like that's a little bit more elusive. So talk me through, I guess, what you're hearing in SEO circles about how Google is determining accuracy.
So it's, a really good example that people can probably really wrap their heads around is Facebook. I know we're talking about Google, but Facebook, for example, Twitter, for example, they're really trying to not share comments and news articles that they deem inaccurate. A lot of it is around the vaccine right now, the accuracy, the efficacy of the vaccine. And so Google's trying to do the same thing as it's reviewing your content. So if you are straight up saying, the War of 1812 happened in 1920, then that's obviously inaccurate information and it's going to flag you for that. So it's trying to fact check scientific, credible, historical resources as best it can. And so basically it's trying to make sure you're not just blatantly lying about something. Obviously there's the facts that it can check, and then there's opinions. And so that's where it gets into sort of that gray area. Like I could state in an opinion, I think the War of 1812 happened in 1920. I don't, for the record. But that's my opinion. And so Google is going to have a harder time fact check. It's going to flag it, be like, I think you're wrong. And I could fight Google as much as I want. I'll lose to Google ultimately, but it's trying to figure out, how much of this can we fact check? And a lot of it comes down to those historical facts, those scientific facts.
I guess expert consensus would be a little bit easier to determine, but you'd have to be able to figure out who's an expert. Any thoughts on that? Like, I know some people are, adding their publications to their bio pages and trying to build out sort of bio pages on their website that reflect their expertise so that Google can see that. If you're a published author and you have an Amazon, what's it called? Amazon Author Central page, you could link to that and also link from the Amazon author page back to you. That would show you as, interesting. I'll give you just a little snippet. I got a call from these guys, a group of doctors who are trying to promote the use of an existing drug for parasites to help stop the spread of COVID. And this is not to treat COVID. This would be a therapeutic to stop the spread. And they're doing all these clinical tests in South America, and where people are dwelling in denser living conditions, and they're finding that it's really effective, but they're getting blackballed by Google from search just because Google's choking on the fact that ivermectin has nothing to do with COVID-19 as far as the expert consensus. But I mean, these guys are testifying in front of Congress. They are in fact experts. They're all published. They've been published in all these medical journals, and they're trying to figure it out. And of course, they're having a difficult time because Google's AI is choking on the fact that they don't conform to the consensus, I guess would be the word.
Yeah, new cutting edge research is always the hardest for an algorithm such as Google to understand, because again, it needs that test data, that historical data in order to say, yes, this is a thing. So part of my background is in academia. And so when we were doing clinical trials, you have to present your hypothesis to a group of peers. And your hypothesis has to be heavily cited, lots of citations of research and trials that have come before you. And so Google's version of that is Google Scholar. And so Google Scholar is comprised of those experts that you were mentioning. And if this is research that nobody has ever seen before, they're going to struggle with it because they have nothing to validate it against. And that's why it's choking on it. It's not to say that the research is inaccurate. There's just no precedent for it.
Now, SEO is just one piece in the digital marketing puzzle. To understand all the pieces and how they fit together, download my new Essential Digital Marketing Skills Guide and get an overview of the most in-demand digital marketing skills for 2021. And you can download it at ericschwartzman.com/essential skills. Katie, I know you also have a lot of experience in compliance, and I wanted to get a better understanding of some of the trademark liabilities of SEO. Are there some sort of common things you see around, SEO in the trademark space?
There are. A lot of them are hashtags or common terms. Someone actually just asked this question recently in our Slack group, Analytics for Marketers. And basically, they had been contacted by a company saying, you can't, is cease and desist, you can't use, this specific phrase. It was something very common, like audience analysis, for example. I forget what the exact phrase was. And a company had trademarked the phrase that this other company was just trying to use casually to explain something. And so after contacting their lawyers, the lawyer said, yep, the way in which you're using it is not trademark infringement. A really good example of this is my good friend, Ginny Dietrich, developed the peso model. And she's constantly having to contact companies who are using the term peso and not giving her credit for it. And so it's just being aware of, the original source of a term. Like you can obviously use proper terms like Google Analytics, but you can't then claim that you invented Google Analytics unless you're Google. You can't claim you invented peso unless you're Ginny. But hashtags, casual terms, like those are up for grabs. You might get contacted. So a really good / terrible example of this is the Kardashians. And so the Kardashians are, I'm going to put quote unquote internet influencers, and they are constantly trying to trademark certain phrases, casual phrases that we all use all the time, so that every time somebody uses them, they get paid some sort of fee for us using that term. Like, back in the 90s, now I'm dating myself, Paris Hilton used to say, "That's hot." And so she was trying to trademark the term "that's hot" so that anytime anybody else used that term, she would be able to collect some sort of a royalty on it. And that's where it starts to get into sort of that ridiculous, area of trademarking terms and phrases, and then what you as an SEO person can do about getting around that.
But could I, like, if I wanted to rank for Trust Insights, and I wrote a blog post that said, Google Analytics, Trust Insights, Google Analytics for demo or whatever. And I SEO'd that and I started ranking for Trust Insights because I had this blog post about how you guys were advising people on doing Google Analytics for setup. Does that infringe on a trademark if Trust Insights is trademarked?
It does. So it then comes down to the decision of the company of what you want to do about it. So if you wrote a blog post saying Trust Insights consults on Google Analytics for setups, and it started ranking really well, but there was no link back to us, then we would take issue with that. But if there's a link back to us, we'd say, great, thank you for the free traffic.
And do you think that's kind of the standard in the industry? It's fine to mention someone as long as you attribute.
That seems to be exactly what it is. And so it's the same thing, in the academic world. You can reference something, but you have to correctly cite it, or else you're basically going to have all of your research discredited because it looks like plagiarism. If you take that theory and apply it then to marketing content, it's the same sort of thing. You can talk about trust insights all day long. And what we do, as long as you attribute it back to us, being the source of that. So some sort of a link to our website, Trust Insights is comprised of, wonderful, lovely people who will help you all day long, making sure that people know that you are not Trust Insights, that you are just referencing Trust Insights, and here's how to find out more about them.
The interesting thing, on LinkedIn is if you share something on LinkedIn with a link, the algorithm devalues that post. So they're almost discouraged. The social algorithm is discouraging you from providing that attribution, which seems like that's really a sort of a recipe for misinformation.
Yeah, social media algorithms are a whole different beast. Instagram, for example, you can't put a link in your post. You have to always say like link in bio, for example. So it's a real disservice to the user. LinkedIn, you can provide the links, but to your point, it devalues it in the algorithm. So for this show in particular, you would put, here's the show, and then link in comments. And so going into the comments was sort of the workaround to not devalue the post in the algorithm.
Yeah, yeah. Talk to us a little bit about zero-click searches. What are they?
So zero-click searches, basically, so Google wants you to never leave the Google ecosphere. So they have their own bubble. They have, all of their different tools, and they don't want to ever take you out of that experience. And so it's their version of that user experience. And so if you're looking for, how do I set up Google Analytics? They don't want you to come to my website, Trust Insights. They want you to stay within their support.google.analytics or whatever the URL is, so that you're never leaving their ecosystem and not giving away that traffic to any other company besides themselves. So they're basically being selfish with search traffic.
Got it. And what are some of those, talk to us about some of those things that they've introduced that provide the user with information without having them leave the site?
So things that they've introduced, so Google My Business, for example, if you're a business, you can apply to Google My Business. And basically what it does is, so let's say you Google Trust Insights, marketing consultancy. What you'll get on, I think it's on the right-hand side of the screen, is that little box that gives the information that says, Trust Insights, founded in, here's the location, and then you get those buttons. But their goal is to make sure that you've already gotten all of the information that you need from that box. Other really good examples are the weather, for example. So if you Google the weather, a lot of times before you even hit, enter, it comes up as one of these search results. And so you're like, oh, it's 42 degrees. I don't even have to go any farther. I don't have to click anything. Same thing with the sports score. So basically, they just want to keep you within their search box as long as they possibly can without ever having you click out of it, because the longer they keep you there, the more information they're getting from you.
And of course, featured snippets, and people also ask results, or
Mm-hmm.
other tools that they're using to sort of give us the answers without us leaving Google.
Exactly.
Hey, I've got a question. I asked this to everybody. No one's ever been able to give me an answer. So maybe there is no answer.
Oh,
That's what
uh-oh.
I think at this point. Okay. So here's the question. What is the best tool for creating and managing tracking links to measure traffic from email campaigns in Google Analytics?
So there's a couple of issues with email and Google Analytics straight out of the box. And so the first thing is the configuration of Google Analytics and the channel grouping. So all of the channel grouping configurations right out of the box are incorrect. They're going to recategorize email as social or referral. So even gmail.com, as it comes into your site, is actually going to be seen as referral traffic, which is incorrect. It's email. So the way to fix that first is to refine your channel grouping to account for Yahoo, Gmail, Outlook, whatever the different email providers are, and create that basically that script to say, anytime you see any of these things, recategorize them as email. So then your data starts to become cleaner as email from your newsletter is coming into your website. Does that answer your question?
That's huge. Do you have that script?
I do. It's
So
$10,000.
it's $10,000,
No,
really?
it's not.
Wow. Because if you share it, we could put it in the post for this, in the show notes for the blog post.
I will say that the script that we've created is proprietary. It's something that we share
I see.
with our clients.
And it's more than just a line or two.
Exactly. It's definitely more in depth. What I can say is that the majority of channel groupings straight out of the box of Google Analytics are set up incorrectly. So there's at least 4 or 5 different channels that you need to resolve in order to be getting that correct tracking information. And then the other side of that conversation is the UTM tracking and making sure that you're using UTM tracking correctly. One of the most common things that we see is that UTM tracking only considers lowercase. And so if you're putting in like Facebook and you use a capital F, it's automatically going to say, I don't know how to read this.
Wow, that's huge. UTM tracking is such a pain in the ass. I have to go. I mean, it's just awful. You have to make the freaking tracking link for every different usage and instance. And then there's no way to manage them other than a spreadsheet.
So again, something that we've created is it's not fully automated, but it's basically a spreadsheet that automatically creates all of those UTM links. And again, it's something that we share with our clients where it creates the link and it also can create the short link, the bit.ly link, for example. So you're not going into the UTM code builder one by one by one. You're actually creating all of it within a spreadsheet. And, it is one of the better ways to manage all of it. But then the other side of that is setting up some sort of automated reporting in Google Data Studio. And so creating filters, creating those segments so that you can track all of that, traffic to the different sources and mediums and campaigns and content types.
Talk to us about Google Analytics 4. What's the big deal?
Google Analytics 4, it's still in its infancy. What we are recommending is that you set up a Google Analytics 4 to run in parallel with your Google Analytics, 3 or classic version. The difference between Google Analytics 3 and Google Analytics 4 is the way that goals are set up. So in Google Analytics 3, the version that most people are on right now, is that you set up a goal in Google Analytics within that platform. And so in Google Analytics 4, all of the goals are set up actually in Tag Manager. And so it's 2 different systems. And so you have to reset all of the goals, but you can do a deeper dive into the data. You can slice it and dice it a little bit more discreetly. And you can also utilize BigQuery a lot easier with Google Analytics 4 data. So that's sort of like the high level differences.
So, people look at SEO as free because it's not paid media.
Mm-hmm.
But there are costs. So what does it cost to be successful in SEO?
Well, it's your time, it's your resources. And so it's those soft dollar costs versus the hard dollar costs. So the hard dollar cost might be the utilization of a subscription to a tool like an RFs or a SEMrush. And then the soft dollar costs are how much time your resources are investing in it. So yes, while technically it's a free channel, it's not free in terms of the time that it takes to create really good quality content. And so that's a specialty of content writers, of, editors and technical writers. Like it's, I think we were talking about earlier, anybody can write a blog post, but that doesn't mean that it's any good or that it has really good structure or that someone's done that in-depth SEO keyword research. So it's those soft dollar costs of the time and effort that goes into SEO. Now, that said, I think a lot of small businesses, for example, feel like SEO is something that's unapproachable because they don't have the big teams. And that's not necessarily true. You really just want to be mindful about what are the things that I, as a business, want to be known for, and then create some content, create some pages on your website that answer those questions. And so think about the common questions that people are asking about the type of business that you have. What is a marketing consultancy? What does a marketing consultancy do? And if you can answer those questions, then you're already, quote unquote, winning at SEO, because those are the types of questions when people ask those, you want to show up for them in the search
There are
results.
so many small businesses and legacy mid-sized businesses, that want to try to make this happen, and they just do not have the resources. And so if there was someone who was sort of a woke digital immigrant from that space who said to you, where do I need to hire writers, and I'm having such a tough time, where do I go? What would you tell them?
I would ask them first, like, what is the problem that you're trying to solve? Because the problem may not be that they need writers. It may be that they just need a plan that's outlined a little bit more
Well, let's say it
carefully.
is. Let's say they hired you
Okay.
and you gave them a plan, and
Yep.
you got their measurement in order. So they're tracking right, their channels reporting correctly. You've given them keywords, you've given them the marching orders. Now they have to execute, and they've got to
Hmm.
build a media company to generate media, and they want writers.
Hmm. There's no shortage of really good freelance writers. And I think freelance writers are a really good option because you can get really good quality content for not a lot of money. So we had mentioned SEMrush, for example. I believe, I apologize if I misquote this, but I believe you can get for less than $1,000 access for one of their content writers. It's actually Chris is messaging me in the real time. He's saying it's $95 for 1,500 words, which is a substantial blog post. So $95 is not that much.
No, it's nothing. But are we talking $95 for 1,500 words of nothingness? Or are we talking, 1,500 words that, has an original idea and maybe says something that everyone else isn't saying? There's so much crap out there.
Yeah. No, there's definitely, you have to be specific about what it is that you're after. But the writing component of SEMrush, for example, gives that structure. So as you're doing your keyword research, you can then sort of, toggle over to the content piece of it, and it starts to give you that outline to say, these are the questions that you should be answering. These are the things that are most common. Do you want to do this yourself, or do you want to have our writer do it for you?
So listen, thank you so much for coming back. It's been great to have you. Final question. At most of the clients you're working with, are SEO and content marketing disciplines separate, or are they handled by the same person?
It really depends. It depends on the size of the company. What we often see with enterprise size organizations is that things are very siloed, which is a disadvantage. And so if you have a mid-size or a smaller organization where SEO and content marketing are handled by the same person or even the same team, you have a better chance of getting really good quality content. Whereas at a larger organization where you have an SEO team, a content team, a measurement team, all of those things are disconnected. And so really, unless, they have a way of sort of a matrix style working together, but ideally there would be some common ground between whoever's doing SEO and whoever's doing content, because the two really have to work together.
What's the best way for someone to reach out and get in touch with you if they wanted to get your help with a project?
Well, the website, super simple, trustinsights.ai. We have contact page. We have a Slack group, trustinsights.ai/analytics for marketers. You can hit us up on social media at Trust Insights. I'm at Katie Robbert on most social platforms, Twitter specifically. That's Robert with two B's, if you're looking for the phonetic. So yeah, we are very present. So super easy to find us, trustinsights.ai.
And you also do a killer podcast.
We do In-Ear Insights. It comes out every Wednesday. It's myself and Chris Penn. And most recently, we tackled Instagram and what's going on with Instagram. So definitely check that one out.
Awesome. Listen, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.